Okay, let's take a look at the posterior thigh. So the one that's most obvious that probably everybody knows before he got into class is the big giant gluteus maximus, okay? So the gluteus maximus is going to come off the ilium and the sacrum, and it's going to work its way over to insert into the femur. When this muscle contracts, it's going to abduct the hip, it's going to pull it back, which we call extension, and it's also going to help to laterally or externally rotate the hip. What you'll notice, without even taking off the gluteus maximus, I can see this deeper gluteus medius, okay? On this model, the gluteus medius blends in with the TFL, so you have to make sure that you're looking at the right thing. But one of the things that helps us remember that the gluteus medius is there is if you find your greater trochanter and find your PSIS, your posterior superior iliac spine, and you connect those together, you draw an imaginary line. Right above that line is a classic place to stick a needle if you were going to inject it into the gluteus medius. So when I take the maximus off, there's a little bit more that becomes visible. The gluteus medius is certainly most obvious, but now you can see the size of it. This muscle, when it contracts, it's going to pull the thigh away from the body. We refer to that as abduction, and it's also going to serve to help medially or internally rotate the hip. When I take the gluteus medius off, and I get as deep as I can get into the posterior thigh, I see the deepest and the smallest gluteus minimus. And when you take a look at the gluteus minimus, you're going to see that that has a very similar function. It's going to abduct and medially or internally rotate the thigh. Okay? Now I'm going to just kind of sit this up here for now as a placeholder, but I want you to note the obvious. When I take the gluteus maximus off, I see this big giant yellow thing. This big giant yellow thing is referred to as the sciatic nerve, okay? And in every single model we have, when we look at the sciatic nerve, you'll see it emerge right under this muscle. I'm going to remove the gluteus medius again, and now you can see this muscle is somewhat pear-shaped. Triangle-shaped, pear-shaped. That muscle is referred to as the piriformis, okay? As the piriformis contracts, it's going to take the hip and laterally or externally rotate it. I can always find the piriformis because the sciatic nerve points right to it. It doesn't really point to it, it emerges from underneath, but it's a classic indicator. There are some other deep muscles of the posterior thigh, but the only other one that we're going to name for our class is this one that looks like a square. Do you notice the fibers are oriented laterally? Transversely is probably a better word. It's a square-shaped muscle that's found deep there to the sciatic nerve. That muscle is referred to as the quadratus femoris, okay? Don't confuse quadratus femoris with quadricep femoris. There is no muscle as the quadricep femoris. That's a muscle group. This deep muscle of the buttock is the quadratus femoris, and it's going to do lateral rotation of the hip. It's going to turn your hip out, and it's going to help a little bit with extension. We'll take a look at the three muscles of the posterior thigh, and all three muscles collectively we refer to as hamstrings. So I've got the more lateral of the muscles referred to as the bicep femoris. That's why on a test bicep we'll never get it done. We have biceps in multiple places. The bicep femoris you'll see originates off the ischial tuberosity and then works its way down to the tibia. When I look medially, I don't know if you'll be able to see this great with the camera, but I've had this real long tendon here. And the tendon's kind of skinny. And if you note, there's a muscle, this long ropey muscle, that lies on top of this broad flat one. So this long ropey muscle, coming from the same place as the bicep femoris, coming from the ischial tuberosity, that long skinny tendon-like muscle is called the semitendinosus. If I were to take that semitendinosus off and go deep to it, which I cannot do with this model, the other broad flat muscle that's deep is the semimembranosus. So I can see it on both sides. Collectively, the bicep femoris, the skinny superficial semitendinosus, and the deeper, more broad and flat semimembranosus make up the hamstrings.